At the age of 18 years old, he signed a contract worth more than 180 million euros, more than any teenager in the history of sport had ever been offered. But 3 years before that moment, a room full of football directors had voted unanimously to release him and send him home. The same boy they dismissed would go on to become the most feared attacker on the planet, carrying an entire nation on his back at a World Cup before he was even old enough to rent a car. Something about that does not add up, and the reason why is buried in a story almost nobody knows. The city of Bondy sits on the northeastern edge of Paris, a place where dreams and concrete exist in equal measure. It was here, in a housing block with a view of a cracked football pitch, that a boy was born in 1998 who would one day make the whole world stop. His father was a football coach, his mother a former handball player of Algerian descent, and together they filled their small apartment with the language of sport. From the moment he could walk, the boy was already running. By the age of 6 years old, he was already embarrassing boys 4 and 5 years older than him on the local pitch in Bondy. His speed was not something he trained for. It was something he was simply born with, as if the laws of physics had agreed to make an exception for him. His father plastered his bedroom walls not with pop stars or action heroes, but with photographs of Ronaldo, the Brazilian, Zinedine Zidane, and Thierry Henry. The boy studied those images every night before he slept, memorizing the angles of their bodies the way other children memorize fairy tales. When he was 11 years old, he was invited to trial with one of the biggest clubs in Europe. He performed brilliantly. And then the club called his father and said they were not interested. The rejection did not break him. It calcified something inside him, turning disappointment into fuel. He returned to Bondy and trained with a ferocity that frightened his own coaches. At 13 years old, he finally caught the attention of one of France's most prestigious football academies. He packed a single bag, kissed his mother goodbye, and moved away from everything he had ever known. If you have felt like the stories told here matter, then follow this channel, because every week we uncover the untold journeys behind the greatest footballers who ever lived, stories that the headlines never had time to tell. The Academy was not a fairy tale. It was a machine designed to sort talent from potential, and many boys arrived full of hope and left full of doubt. He watched friends disappear one by one, cut loose by a system that had no room for sentiment. He called home every evening, and his father always said the same thing: keep your head down, do the work, and let your feet do the talking. So that is exactly what he did. At 16 years and 166 days old, he stepped onto a professional first-team pitch for the first time. The crowd barely noticed. That would change very quickly. Within weeks, he was not just playing, he was dominating. He moved through opposition defenses the way water moves through cracks, finding spaces that simply should not have existed. Scouts from the largest clubs in the world began arriving at his matches. They sat in the stands with their notepads and their binoculars and watched him do things a teenager simply was not supposed to be able to do. The offer came from one of the wealthiest clubs on earth, and the fee that changed hands was enough to make entire football associations go silent for a moment. He was still a teenager. Paris welcomed him the way Paris welcomes very few people, with the kind of noise that rattles windows 3 blocks away. He wore his new colors for the first time, and the whole city collectively held its breath. The 2018 World Cup in Russia was supposed to be France's tournament of transition, a learning experience for a young squad still finding its shape. Nobody told him that. He ran at defenses from around the world with a calm that bordered on arrogance, and every time he scored, the camera would find his face and discover the same unsettling composure. He was not excited. He had expected this. France became world champions on the 15th of July, 2018, and in the final he scored a goal of such devastating clarity that even the opposing goalkeeper could be seen shaking his head in disbelief. He donated his entire World Cup bonus, 100% of it, to a children's charity in France. He announced it quietly, with no camera crew present, and the news leaked weeks later through a third party. The records began to fall so regularly that statisticians ran out of historical comparisons. He was doing things on a football pitch that had simply never been done at his age by any player in any era. But behind the numbers and the highlights and the magazine covers, the pressure was growing into something almost unmanageable. Every match was now a referendum on whether he was truly the greatest of his generation. The 2022 World Cup in Qatar would become the stage for the most discussed individual tournament performance in a generation. A series of matches so extraordinary that even football people who had grown cynical found themselves watching with their mouths open. In the final against Argentina, he scored a hat trick, becoming only the second player in history to achieve that feat in a World Cup final. France still lost, and the expression on his face when the final whistle blew told you everything about who this man really was. Defeat did not diminish him. If anything, the image of him standing in that stadium, refusing to hide his pain while the world celebrated around him, became the most human and the most heroic thing he had ever done. He eventually made the move that football had been waiting years to witness, signing for one of the most historically important clubs on earth, and carrying with him the weight of a sport that had decided he was its present and its future simultaneously. The boy from Bondi, who was once sent home from a trial, had become the most recognizable face in world sport. And in the city that had formed him, the streets still know his name the way they know their own history. He has spoken publicly about the responsibility of visibility, about what it means to come from a place the world overlooks and to stand in arenas that the world cannot ignore. He understands that his story is not just about football. Somewhere in Bondi right now, a child is on a concrete pitch in a jersey 2 sizes too large, running until the streetlights come on. That child has watched every goal, memorized every move, and decided that if it was possible once, it is possible again. That is what a legacy built on a concrete pitch in Bondi looks like. And if you want to know which extraordinary football life we uncover next, follow this channel, because the most remarkable stories in this sport are still waiting to be told.